You ever see a lion move in a pack? No. He walks alone, and yet every creature knows he is king. A man with no friends isn't lonely, he's focused. He's dangerous, and he's free. In a world that praises popularity over purpose, standing alone is seen as weakness. But sometimes solitude is the greatest show of strength. This video isn't for the faint-hearted. It's for the man who's walked away from the crowd to build himself in silence. Let's talk about why the man with no friends is the most secure of all. When you walk alone, you're no longer distracted by the noise of the world. You don't have 5 different opinions pulling you in 5 different directions. You're not trying to fit in, to be accepted, to be liked. You're not seeking applause. You're not auditioning for someone else's approval. What you're doing is listening. And not just listening to the surface thoughts, but to the deeper voice, your own. That quiet, steady whisper that's always been there, buried under the pressure to please, to conform, to blend in. And once you finally hear it, once you finally recognize it, that's when the real work begins. Because knowing yourself isn't easy. It requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires silence. Most people don't want silence. Silence is loud when you've been hiding from yourself. A man who walks alone doesn't hide. He faces himself every day. He learns what makes him angry, what makes him weak, what inspires him, what scares him. He understands his fears, not to run from them, but to master them. He becomes a student of his own spirit. That's a man who's dangerous, not because he harms others, but because no one can manipulate him. He's not easily swayed. He's not led by trends. He's not confused about his mission. He's grounded, and that's rare. You see, in a world addicted to noise, distractions, and clout, its self-knowledge is revolutionary. It separates the man from the boy. The boy chases attention, needs a crowd to feel alive. But the man, he knows who he is when the room is empty. When no one is clapping, when no one is watching, that's where his strength comes from. Not from his circle, but from his center. And when a man knows himself, truly knows himself, he becomes unbreakable. Because how do you break a man who already faced his demons in the dark? How do you shake a man who doesn't need your acceptance to feel worthy? You can't. And that's what makes him secure. That's what makes him powerful. Because all the power he needs is already inside. Not borrowed, not gifted, owned. Knowing yourself is the foundation of every other success. You can't lead others if you haven't first led yourself. You can't demand loyalty, respect, or love from the world if you haven't cultivated it within. So that time alone, that walk without friends, without distractions, without the echo chamber of other voices, that's not loneliness. That's training. That's transformation. That's where the man is made. Because when the world pulls him in 1,000 directions, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't bend, he moves with intention. Why? Because he knows who he is. And that kind of man, he's not just secure, he's unstoppable. A man with no friends isn't desperate for likes. He isn't scrolling through social media hoping someone notices his new haircut, his car, his vacation, or his latest move. He doesn't wait for applause. He doesn't chase claps, because he understands something most people never learn. External validation is a moving target. You hit it today, and tomorrow it shifts. One day they love you, the next they forget you. But when you stop depending on others to feel worthy, that's when the real power kicks in. That's when you become unshakable. You see, most people are out here building their identity like it's a house of mirrors. Every wall reflecting someone else's opinion. One false move and the whole thing collapses. But a man with no friends, he builds his foundation on bedrock, on truth, on internal standards. He doesn't perform to please. He doesn't live to impress. He lives by a code that he wrote for himself, and he doesn't rewrite it just to fit in. That kind of man walks into a room and doesn't need to announce his presence. He doesn't crave attention because he is attention. People feel his energy, not because he's loud, but because he's centered. He's not asking, "Do you like me?" He's asking himself, "Do I respect the man I see in the mirror?" That's a different level of confidence. That's real self-worth. Approval seeking is a trap. It's a drug, and once you get a taste, you're always chasing that next hit. But that chase takes you further and further away from who you really are. You start bending, twisting, breaking your back just to stay liked, just to stay accepted. You lose yourself in the process. But when you cut that cord, when you realize that your value isn't up for public debate, you become free. You're no longer a puppet to other people's opinions. You don't dress for them. You don't speak for them. You don't live for them. A man with no friends learns early on that silence is a gift. In that silence, he forges his own approval. He doesn't need a cheerleading squad. He doesn't need someone to post, "I'm proud of you," just so he can feel proud. He already knows his worth. And when that kind of man moves, he moves with purpose. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't second guess. Because he's not looking over his shoulder wondering what everyone thinks. He's locked in. He's dialed in. And because he's not swayed by the tides of approval, he stands like a mountain. You want to know what real security looks like? It's not money. It's not fame. It's not followers. It's waking up in the morning, standing tall, and knowing you are enough. No likes required. That's the man who can't be manipulated. That's the man who can't be bought. That's the man who doesn't need a crowd because he leads himself. The loudest voice in your life should be your own. That voice, the one deep in your gut, not your fear, not your doubt, but your truth, is the only compass that can guide you to who you're meant to be. But the problem with most men is they've given the mic to everyone else. Friends, social media, coworkers, the opinions of people who've never walked a mile in their shoes. The world is loud. Everyone's shouting, giving advice, demanding your attention, telling you who you should be, what you should do, what success should look like. And if you're not grounded in yourself, you'll start moving based on other people's noise instead of your own vision. A secure man doesn't allow that. He's not easily influenced, not because he's arrogant, but because he knows the cost of distraction. He knows how easy it is to start chasing someone else's dream and end up miles away from your purpose. That's why he guards his environment like a vault. He's selective with his time, intentional with his conversations, and ruthless with his focus. When the voices around him start pulling him in the wrong direction, he doesn't argue. He steps away. He clears the room to clear his mind. See, when you're insecure, you're vulnerable to influence. You're always looking for confirmation, always asking for advice, always needing a co-signer for your decisions. But when you're secure, when you've done the work, when you've faced your own demons, you don't move like that. You don't need to be told what to do because you already know. You don't need a committee to validate your next step. You just power. That's freedom. Being hard to influence doesn't mean you don't listen. It means you don't absorb everything you hear. It means you filter the noise and only let in what aligns with your mission. Because influence is energy, and if you're not careful, other people will project their fears onto you. They'll limit you with their small thinking. They'll water down your fire because they couldn't handle their own. That's why a secure man stays centered. He doesn't absorb energy, he sets the tone. He walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere, not the other way around. It takes strength to walk that path. It takes discipline to say, "No, I'm not doing it that way," even when the crowd says otherwise. It takes courage to be misunderstood, to stand alone, to be the only voice in your corner. But that's where greatness is born, not in the echo chamber of other people's opinions, but in the silence of your own certainty. The man who isn't easily influenced has already made a decision about who he is. And every day, every action, every thought reflects that. That kind of man, he doesn't chase approval. He commands respect. He builds in silence because he understands that real growth happens away from the spotlight. There's no need for him to announce his every move, to post every effort, to seek every nod of approval. While the world is busy broadcasting potential, he's becoming the proof. He doesn't need to speak because his actions are writing his legacy in bold. Every hour he spends alone, every moment of discomfort, Every setback he overcomes in private, it's all adding weight to his character. He's not trying to impress the world with noise. He's building something that will one day be so undeniable it won't need to be explained. He understands the value of quiet. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. While others fill their time with distractions, he's learning, refining, sharpening. He's in the gym when no one's watching. He's at the desk after the lights are out. He's putting in the hours, not for recognition, but because the work itself is sacred. He's not moved by trends. He's not chasing moments. He's building something timeless. While they're chasing likes, he's chasing legacy. He doesn't post the process because the process is personal. It's his crucible, his classroom, his battlefield. A man like this doesn't waste energy explaining his path to people who can't see his vision. He's not offended by being underestimated. In fact, he prefers it. Because while they're sleeping on him, he's leveling up. He's not interested in convincing anyone of who he is. He's focused on becoming who he knows he can be. There's a different kind of hunger in a man who walks alone, a deeper fire. He's not fueled by applause, he's fueled by a purpose. He knows the power of the unseen. The root grows in silence before the tree bears fruit. That's how real strength is forged. He's not waiting for the right people to believe in him. He believes in himself. That's why he keeps building when no one's clapping. That's why he keeps showing up when no one's watching. Because he knows that eventually, the silence will break. Not with noise, but with results. When the time comes, the world won't have a choice but to see what he's built. But by then, he won't need the praise. The applause will be too late. He'll already be on to the next thing, still moving in silence, still chasing the fire that doesn't go out just because others finally notice the flame. This kind of man is rare. He doesn't announce. He doesn't complain. He just works. While others debate, he decides. While they delay, he delivers. And when they ask how he did it, he'll smile. Because he knows the truth. He built it in silence. And now it speaks for itself. A secure man is highly selective with his energy because he understands its value. He knows that energy is currency, and where he spends it determines what grows in his life. He's not in the business of convincing anyone of his worth, nor is he desperate to keep people around just to fill space. He's learned, sometimes the hard way, that peace is more valuable than popularity, and solitude is far better than sitting in rooms full of chaos, noise, and shallow conversation. He doesn't entertain drama, not because he can't handle it, but because he's evolved past it. He's no longer drawn to the thrill of emotional turbulence, arguments that go nowhere, or relationships that demand he shrink himself just to keep the peace. His version of peace isn't silence during a storm. It's not letting the storm into the room at all. That's the difference between surviving and building. And he's a builder. This kind of man doesn't make decisions from a place of desperation. He doesn't keep people in his life just because they've always been there. Time served doesn't equal value. Loyalty is important, but he won't be loyal to people who are disloyal to his growth, to his vision, to the path he's chosen. He's not afraid to outgrow people. He welcomes it, because he's not here to stay the same. He's here to evolve. And sometimes evolution means subtraction. The secure man doesn't fear being misunderstood. If someone walks away because he no longer entertains their chaos, he lets them go. He knows that the right people don't bring storms. They bring calm. He understands that his energy is sacred, and only those who respect that sacred space get access to it. He moves with a quiet kind of discipline. He may not explain every boundary, every no, or every door he chooses to close, but trust. Those decisions are never random. They're deliberate. They are part of a larger mission, a vision only he fully sees. People often mistake his distance for arrogance, but the truth is he's protecting his purpose. He's shielding his focus. Not because he's cold, but because he's clear. He knows that distractions wear many faces. Some come as friends, lovers, even family. And if that energy is inconsistent, chaotic, draining, he walks away. No argument, no drama, just distance. because he refuses to compromise his peace for anyone. The man who is selective with his energy doesn't just protect his space, he amplifies it. The less noise he allows in, the louder his vision becomes. The fewer distractions he entertains, the faster he moves. His presence becomes powerful not because of how loud he is, but because of how intentional he's become. That's what security looks like. It's not just confidence, it's control. It's knowing when to engage, when to observe, and when to simply walk away. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table he's building, because not everyone is bringing value to the meal. And the secure man, he's not afraid to eat alone. He doesn't complain about being alone. He becomes the brother, the protector, the motivator he used to look for in others. That's growth. That's leadership. That's the kind of man who doesn't follow the world. He builds his own. A man who becomes the friend he needs, no longer seeks outside himself for strength, for guidance, or for emotional rescue. He's done waiting on someone to pick up the phone, done hoping someone checks in, because he realized something powerful: no one is coming. And in that realization, he found something deeper. He can be everything he ever needed. He learns to be his own comfort in pain, his own fire when the world tries to dim his light. He becomes his own coach when he's down, his own fan when no one is cheering, and his own warrior when life demands a fight. This isn't some cold, bitter isolation. No, this is clarity. This is a man rising from the ashes of disappointment, betrayal, and abandonment. When people fell short, when friends disappeared, when loyalty turned to silence, he didn't let that turn his heart to stone. Instead, he turned inward and did the work, the deep, difficult, quiet work. He studied his fears, faced his insecurities. He asked himself the hard questions and waited in the silence for honest answers. He learned to forgive, not because they apologized, but because peace was more valuable than pain. This man doesn't avoid connection. He simply no longer depends on it to survive. He loves from abundance, not from lack. He doesn't cling. He doesn't chase. When he gives his time, his loyalty, his trust, it's intentional, not desperate, because he knows how it feels to be alone, and he respects the sanctuary he built in that solitude. He starts talking to himself differently, encouraging instead of criticizing. He corrects with compassion, not contempt. He holds himself accountable, but never without grace. He becomes the voice that says, "You're not done," when he wants to quit. The voice that says, "Get back up," when life knocks him down. He doesn't shame his tears. He wipes them and keeps moving, because he knows real strength isn't loud, it's silent, steady, composed. And as he becomes this friend to himself, something incredible happens. He becomes magnetic, not because he's trying to be, but because that kind of inner power draws the right people in. Not users, not opportunists, but real ones. People who respect solitude, who bring peace, not chaos, who recognize a man who's whole, not because he's surrounded, but because he stands firm on his own. This is the man who no longer begs to belong. He belongs to himself. And because of that, he shows up differently in every room he enters. Calm, focused, centered. That's not arrogance. That's earned confidence. And it was built alone, not in noise, not in crowds, but in the quiet moments when he decided to become everything he needed for himself. So if you're walking alone right now, good. That means you're on the right path. Don't chase crowds. Don't beg for company. A secure man walks in silence, works in the dark, and lets his results speak at sunrise. Be that man. Be the lion. If this hit you in the soul, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More truth is coming, and it's only for the strong.